Well, when the Saints go marching in, or they're going back to the eights. Hey everybody, I'm Cortez, and I'm a critic, and welcome back. We're on the final side of the NFL. We're in the South now. And if you're from the South, welcome, hospitality. If you're not, well, still welcome. And we're gonna start our South 2025 draft recap with the NFC South, which is basically my hometown area because I happen to be a Buccaneer fan. But we're going to start off with a team that I just mocked and praised in the New Orleans Saints, as they are, for the first time in probably a while, are being viewed as probably the fourth team in their own division. The Falcons and the Panthers, at least on paper, are viewed as potentially a little bit more, let's say, focus. And Tampa has won the division 4 years in a row, something that they have never been able to do before. And yes, you can say the whole NFC South is basically the Division 3 of the NFL, but I always feel like, they said that about the NFC East, they call it the NFC Least. So going back and forth when it comes to the worst division, I can understand how somehow it seems like everyone in this division does not take the opportunity of winning the division seriously, but let's be real. For the longest time, it was Cam Newton and the Panthers, Matt Ryan and the Falcons, and Drew Brees and the Saints, and Tampa was literally the Succaneers. So now that time has passed, and like all professional teams from NBA to NHL, there's always a new team going from greatness to going back to lose, and then going back to greatness, and then coming back from losers. The Saints are sadly probably viewed as the fourth best team in their own division, and with controversies on the side happening outside of the organization, this draft class seems almost being forced into a position that they may not be ready yet. So let's talk about the New Orleans Saints as they try to, get themselves somewhat back to prominence because the clock is still ticking and they have yet to reset it. So before we get officially into the Saints picks, let's address the big thing in the room. Derek Carr, by the time of this recording, has long been passed. Derek Carr says, I'm done, I'm out. And the Saints' entire organization, from the front office to the quarterback to, the head coach, which, let's be real, even commentators that do Louisiana sports, that cover the LSU Tigers, that cover, the New Orleans Saints and everything in between, they even said that somehow the Saints franchise, the whole organization, was not appealing to a lot of coaches that wanted to go. Even those that did eventually get interviews, they weren't sold. And I can kind of agree. The Saints had a massive, cap hit in the negatives, to the point that I was almost to the point like, how am I going to keep any players? And some coaches probably felt like, I don't think I'm out of control. Before Derek Carr calls his retirement, he was still viewed on a heavy contract. And they had some players like Cam Jordan and Alvin Kamara. They were wondering, are these guys on the verge of being trade casualties because they're kind of getting too old? And how much longer can they go? When can we finally start the rebuild? There's not a Drew Brees coming out from nowhere this time around to bail us out. And there's definitely no hurricane to make us feel, united into a dominant four for the next 10 years. So the whole Saints organization I feel like they should be in rebuild, but for whatever reason, they're still being viewed as we can still do it. And I think it's because the Bucs have not really dominated the NFC South, and the Falcons and the Panthers maybe look better, but no one has taken that leap into, there's, at least for right now, there's no team that just screams 13-win team. Everyone still believes that 9 and 10 win will win the division. So I feel like the Saints are still knocking on the door, and let's be real, this was another team that was considering in the Shedeur Sanders sweepstake. And they thought that the Saints, it was like the last 2 weeks before the draft, they were talking about Shedeur Sanders. And then, with the 9th overall pick in the 2025 NFL Draft, the New Orleans Saints selected Calvin Banks Jr., offensive tackle, Texas. Now, let's all be real, Banks Jr. is a left tackle, and I don't care if you have, a top-tier quarterback or the low-tier quarterback. Let's be real, a left tackle that's good can make a B- quarterback into an A- quarterback. and of course an A-plus quarterback into an S-tier ranked quarterback. It's because that protection on the left side, since most quarterbacks are right-handed, it kind of covers their blind side. And let's be real, Todd Bowles, the defensive-minded coach, Raheem Morris, the defensive-minded coach, and the Panthers are trying to get to somewhat of a dominant force that they were back in the day. So in a weird way, you kind of feel like we want to protect whoever our quarterback is from potentially having broken collarbones in a frustrating Sunday afternoon. So let's definitely get our insurance policy first before we figure out what the quarterback situation is. And when it came to the Pittsburgh Steelers and the New Orleans Saints, I was honestly more on the Saints side because the Derek Carr situation was not good. It was not good. It was iffy. It was questionable. It felt like there never was a straight answer coming from the organization and from most media sources about Derek Carr and the quarterback situation in general. That maybe Spencer Rattler was going to be the starting quarterback or was going to get more time to start next year by default. I kind of felt like maybe that should have been like, let's see what happens. I mean, the Raiders gave Aiden O'Connell a full season to see what happens. But I really thought the Saints will go with Shedeur Sanders for reasons of attention. Let's be real, sometimes getting a star player is enough to get people in the seats because, let's be real, it's a money business more than entertainment business. But they didn't. They went with the insurance policy first before they figured out what the car is going to be. And then, clever segue, in the second round, with the 40th overall pick in the 2025 NFL Draft, the New Orleans Saints selected Tyler Shough, quarterback, Louisville. Now, I was told that Tyler had a very unique quarterback journey in college. He was kind of in and out of different programs, and eventually, long story short, he's 25 years old. Now, for most quarterbacks, that's not at all terrible. 25 is still potentially probably a good 10 years, if you're good, of football to go there for. But for a starting quarterback, most quarterbacks come into the league 21, 22. There's potentially an argument of 2 or 3 years of Tyler's career has already been gone because of him being drafted so late. I mean, we all saw it with Brandon Weeden from Oklahoma State, who was picked up by the Browns, and he was almost already Chris Weinke from Florida State by the Panthers. So we can understand the notion of not so much ageism as, oh my God, he's so old, is that if he's good, how much we have a good year. And if he doesn't get involved, it just becomes a case of, wow, we kind of don't have time to wait on a guy who's 25 years old to the point that by the time he reaches 26, 27, he's almost 30. And we all know 30 is kind of like almost a deal-breaking type of argument when it comes to athletes, especially in football. Quarterback might be the one position that might have more leniency than others. Receivers, running backs, DBs, linebackers, linemen, once they reach 30, it's almost as if to say, we need to start thinking about the future because who knows how much longer the athlete has. And sometimes it's mainly because due to wear and tear, not so much because of performance, I believe. And according to ESPN.com mock depth chart, Tyler is viewed as the starter. I think that is probably just projecting. I feel like Spencer Rattler will probably get the starting job, depends if Tyler shows out. But I would honestly say for Kellen Moore's sake, because remember, Kellen Moore is the first-time head coach and he kind of wants to make his splash, he probably will Tyler into the starting role probably sooner than expected. And if he doesn't grasp the offense quickly, it's going to put the Saints back in a production and a competitive nature so early in the season. And if the Panthers and the Falcons with their young quarterbacks, and Young and Michael, the Saints might be already in a deep hole with everyone else already surpassing them. So that's something else to consider. I personally will say trust Spencer Rattler because most of the receivers will be back from injuries, something they probably didn't really have toward the end of it. So I will say trust Spencer Rattler, at least for the first quarter of the season, see where it goes, and then we'll see what Tyler do. But I never really been a big fan of thrusting a quarterback into the starting role unless he was like, a first round top 10 pick. That's just my thoughts on that. Then we go to the third round With a 71st overall pick in the 2025 NFL Draft, the New Orleans Saints selected Vernon Broughton, defensive tackle, Texas. Cool, we get 2 defensive linemen from the University of Texas. Go Longhorns, hook 'em. And the the Saints have switched to a 3-4 defense, or maybe they have. I just never noticed because I feel like a lot of their players felt more like a 4-3. Chase Young to me felt more like a 4-3 defense and a 3-4 defense. He did have some great productivity. That Cameron Green coming back. Cameron Jordan, we all know. I think there was a recent article or interview he did. I forgot which reliable source, but basically says if the Saints have another bad season, he might say that's it for me and call it a career. I still remember when Cam was drafted at University of California and how much of an impact he has made as a person, as a character, and as an athlete. Demario Davis is another player for the Saints that I kind of feel like he might have been the way out. When Malcolm Jenkins called it, as much as the Saints gave Malcolm Jenkins the start of his career, I still view Malcolm Jenkins more effective as an Eagle than a Saint, even though he started his career as a Saint and developed into the athlete that he is now. I feel like Pete Warner is going to become the new face of the Saints defense in time. And of course, Carl Granson will be there as well. But when it comes to the Saints, Dean Vernon, they view him as a right defensive tackle behind Saunders, which I believe they drafted him last year. Let me check that. 2019. Okay, so it wasn't that far, and he was done out of the Kansas City Chiefs. I thought he was a new player to the Saints, but I thought he was new as a new young player. But he was a player from the Chiefs. Now he's with the Saints. That's where my brain went there. But for them running a 3-4 defense, new scheme, it's going to be a challenge, let's be real. Dennis Allen, as much even people in New Orleans said he's not a good head coach, but he was a great coordinator, kind of like a lot of, players today. Steve Spagnuolo was a good defensive coordinator, not a good head coach. So that I feel like this is just a case of, let's see the Saints can find an identity again. Let's see the Saints can find an identity with their defense, because I feel like with Dennis Allen gone, I don't know. I'm not feeling as confident. If Dennis Allen was somehow still on the Saints, like somehow he got demoted but stayed as a defensive coordinator with Kellen Moore as a head coach, the Saints defense would still be the face of the franchise. Right now, I think the face of the franchise is the players that they have, wondering how many years they have left. Cam Jordan, Alvin Kamara, Chris Olave, if you can stay healthy. So Vernon coming in here, this just feels to add youth to a defensive scheme that's going to go through a whole new transformation with a new regime. Then still in the 3rd round with the 92nd overall pick in the 2025 NFL Draft, the New Orleans Saints selected Jonas Sanker, safety, University of Virginia. I'm going to say exactly right. This is clearly meant to be Tyrann Mathieu's air replacement. He's here to learn under the Honey Badger himself, to see what he can develop and learn. I'm getting kind of a Marcus Williams kind of vibes with this guy. Another young player that may be thrust into the starting lineup or sooner than later. We'll see how much he can take advantage of the ropes. The secondary of the Saints is still filled with a lot of young players. Kool-Aid is still a young player they got from Alabama, which I feel like they got to steal. I didn't think he was able to develop as well as they wanted to, or maybe didn't get enough playing time, because I was expecting more splash plays from Kool-Aid than I didn't. So maybe a second year under the belt, now being officially thrust into the starting lineup, he'll probably make more splashes. But the Saints secondary is still filled with very, very young players to veterans that may be on their way out. So very little in between when it comes to experience and depth. And like I said, a new defensive scheme does have that sense of how quickly can the veterans and the young players adapt. Because some of these players are coming into, they're in their second year, and they just learned a new defensive scheme last year, and now they got a whole new coaching staff this year. So to me, we'll see how much, but I feel like Jonas is clearly meant for Tyrann Mathieu, a potential replacement, and I would not be surprised if he gets some rotation or even some starts this season. Especially if the season happens to go south. Don't be surprised if the Saints try to see what the rookies they have and kind of maybe force them into starting lineups sooner than later, because they said, we got to see where our future's at now. We got to see where the future is. Then we go to the 4th round with the 112th pick in the 2025 NFL Draft. The New Orleans Saints selected Danny Stutsman, linebacker, Oklahoma. Is it Stutsman or Stutzman? I really want to call him the stud man. Patton. Not gonna lie, when I saw Danny play in Oklahoma, one, I'm surprised he went this late. I thought maybe he'd been like maybe a mid-third round pick. But he doesn't have the attitude, but I get the Boz vibe from him. I'm not saying that he is that king of linebacker, but I just get that he's an Oklahoma player. He's a hard nose. He has like this, swagger about him. He's not arrogant, but he does have like this, Oklahoma linebacker Bosworth type of aura around him. And I feel like Danny, when I heard him, I was like, Demario Davis' replacement. And look, lo and behold, they have him behind Davis in the rotation number 2. So, like I said, the Saints team feels more of they need to rebuild, but somehow they're still being stubborn by they don't want to rebuild. Danny Stubman will probably get rotation time. Heaven forbid injuries might force him into the lineup. But I feel like Danny could be the more aggressor linebacker, especially when it comes to run support, while Pete Warner might be more of the perimeter, passing linebacker. Both are aggressive. Both will definitely surpass. I think Danny could be a potential diamond that just needs a little bit of a polish to shine. If Danny becomes, like a 110 tackle type guy with like, a couple of blitz packman sacks, don't be surprised. I feel like Danny could be he could be the bigger impact than most of the defensive players that the Saints have drafted. Don't be surprised. And that could be as a rotation player too. Make splash plays here or there and make himself known. Then still in the 4th round with the 131st pick in the 2025 NFL Draft, the New Orleans Saints selected Quincy Riley, cornerback, Louisville. And Quincy Riley right now is being currently viewed as a nickelback formation. Like I said, everyone in the NFC South somehow is running to a 3-4 defense. Either a major coincidence or what, but everyone's running a 3-4 defense in the NFC South now. I like the 3-4 defense better than most because I feel like it gives your defensive linemen who are more athletic a more opportunity to make splash plays defensively. But Quincy Riley coming in, a lot of these defensive players are already viewed as backups according to the depth chart. At least, projected to be backups already. And a lot of them are behind players that are veterans. Some with the Saints, some just in their NFL careers. So this feels a little bit more of for the future, for development, for time. So I'm going to look at the Saints and say that Quincy Riley, like Danny, like Vernon, this is for the future. I think Kellen Moore is probably more focused on getting the offense good because that was his bread and butter. That was his success. That was his calling card. Than the defense. The defense, just hopefully the veterans in there will stay healthy and the rookies they got from the past will develop into further future veterans for the Saints. But to me, the Saints defense is together with unproven rookies, too young to judge, and veterans that are just trying to make it through a season without causing too many further injuries to their livelihood outside of football. And then one of the most unique picks, where I feel like he's a bigger splash than people give him credit for, in the 6th round, surprisingly, with the 184th pick in the 2025 NFL Draft, the New Orleans Saints selected Devin Neal, running back, Kansas. Now, I'm not going to criticize too much, but I will address some flaws. The one game I saw Kansas really was the game of Colorado with, Buffalo, Sanders and everyone, versus Kansas. I remember watching that game because, one, I was kind of hoping that Colorado can get an extra win here and there and potentially be competing for a conference championship. And who knows, maybe they could have made it to the playoffs and at least get better ratings. I don't know. But that game either proved that Kansas' rushing attack is way superior than we give them credit for, or Colorado's defense was really, really bad, and Travis Hunter with his Heisman candidacy was not enough. That was the game that really, made me pay attention to Devin Neal and how they were running up and down the field against Colorado. Like I said, it could be a combination of Colorado's defense being that bad. It could be a combination of the Kansas offense. And Kansas wasn't a bad program. I remember the year Kansas was a bad program for like every year in a year. They were always like a 2 or 3 win team every year. If they win 6 games, make a bowl game, that's considered like we did it, But Kansas last year was a lot more formidable, but a lot of it felt like was because of their hard nose just run the ball down your throats. And Devin Neal was a big factor of that. Devin Neal, the Saints recently got Cam Akers to join the roster. Alvin Kamara, I'm wondering if he could potentially be a trade casualty by the trade deadline, depends how the season goes. Devin Neal feels more of run behind the line, power nose, straightforward, type of running back. Alvin Kamara is a beautiful wild card. Alvin Kamara has made running backs way more athletic and probably set up the bar for other running backs in college, that you need to be a little bit more like a receiver specialist type guy than just run the ball behind. Kamara can run the ball behind the tackles, we know that. But Devin Neal, I feel like he is going to be the workhorse to run clock, stop momentum, what have you. Devin Neal's going to get more playing time, but I'm feeling it's because, Kamara either going to become a trade casualty, he'll be used more passing, he might need a break. I see Devin Neal being potentially be the ground and pound runner of the Saints. And that might help with whoever the quarterback is, so maybe that's the reason why they got him, because with Kamara and Miller and Akers, running back by committee, they might be more associated with giving the ball to the running backs and let them do something, than try to force Spencer Rattler or even Tyler to throw the ball when they're both still viewed as we don't know what we have yet. Then with this in the 7th round, with the 248th pick in the 2025 NFL Draft, the New Orleans Saints selected Malik Matavio, tight end, UCLA. Okay. Kind of. I'm not gonna lie, that was a little bit of a head scratcher. I honestly thought the Saints may would have gone receiver, or maybe gone with a potential, defensive lineman type player in this pick. The biggest reason because I feel like Juwan Johnson is still there. Taysom Hill's injury makes you wonder how much it can be utilized and how much it's going to be utilized more than just an extra pair of hands to catch balls under Kellen Moore. Foster Moreau's still there and Jack Stoll's still there. I don't know. Let me look a little deeper into this man to see, because for all I know, he could be viewed as what I like to call a thick receiver. Let me see if I can find his information. Okay, okay. He's 6'8". He's 6'8", 263. So I'm going to say big target. Big target, and Kellen Moore probably got a little excited behind it, saying this guy is a, big 6'8". And I feel there was a combination of maybe it works out, maybe he doesn't, but, big target receiver for a young quarterback is always there. I think his raw attributes will probably give him more of an edge, especially in jump ball situation. So I probably want to say this is a wild card for Kellen Moore. They're saying this is a pick they feel is we want to develop him as a uniqueness, and we'll see how it develops down the line. But right now, his raw ability might be enough to be like, he may not have a full playbook, but we have maybe 10 plays just for him. Goal line, red zone, jump ball situations. And then with the last pick, with the 254th pick in the 2025 NFL Draft, the New Orleans Saints selected Fadil Diggs, edge, Syracuse. Now, Fadil Diggs, they currently have him. I'm looking at the depth chart here. And they have him as a weak side linebacker right behind Carl Granderson. So definitely screams rotational players. Really surprised that I feel like they probably wanted Diggs earlier, but when they saw Matavo from UCLA still there, they're like, I think Kellen Moore probably got a little too excited and probably pulled the trigger. Let's get him. He's 6'8", he plays tight end, he's a big guy. Let's see what it does. And if Diggs is still there or another edge rusher is still there, we'll get it because, sometimes rawness is just enough to be like, If we can develop him into something better, cool. Plus, it's a 7th round pick. 7th round picks are always meant to be polished and sharpened, and we'll see him move forward. So we'll see how much he gets involved. And like I said, Carl got a big contract recently, so he has to definitely prove his worth. But with the Saints defense going through a whole new regime change and different coaching styles and different schemes, the more defensive players you have, especially the young ones that can develop quickly, you have a potential future foundation for further defensive players to come. So that's how I feel about with Diggs. And that is the New Orleans Saints draft class. The grade I give the Saints, something I haven't given to most teams in a while, but I'm giving the Saints a not yet. I don't see the Saints remotely competing for even 500. Saints winning 8 games is a stretch to me. If the Saints somehow, Alvin gets a second win, Cam goes nuts, Tyler or Spencer develop better than we expected, Chris Olave and Shaheed, stay healthy, the Saints could make some noise. The Saints have always been very consistent with the NFC South. Sometimes not in their, not based on their requests. Sometimes based on just, wow, you just always manage to beat Tampa and Tampa for some reason. But we'll take it. So it all depends on how quickly the Saints can get involved. And Kellen Moore is a new head coach, so we got to put that little variable in there. But right now, compared to everyone else in the NFC South, I can't even say the Saints even going to make. The Saints might be more of a spoiler team. Well, they'll spoil the impacts of whoever is leading the division by December. And the player I'm most excited about is Devin Neal, the running back out of Kansas, because I believe the Saints are going to become a run-heavy style of offense. While Kamara will be utilized more in space and screen pass and even route running, I think Devin Neal is going to become the workhorse over time that basically the Saints are going to try to slow down the game to make the game a little bit, at least not go out of control. It depends on who they're playing. So Devin Neal is the player I am most excited about because I believe he will be a workhorse for the Saints to give pressure and keep the longevity of Alvin Kamara during the season and also help out whoever the quarterback is in moving forward this season. So that is the New Orleans Saints. We are done with the Saints. Now we'll talk about the teams that everyone is probably a little bit more excited about. And the team we're going to talk about next will be going from Louisiana to Carolina. As we're going to talk about Dave Canales' second year as the head coach of the Carolina Panthers and see that maybe Panther fans feel a little bit more optimistic about Bryce Young. Or was that last hurrah just a fluke? Because trust me, we have seen it too often in this league. Players have one good half season and then disappeared. So until next time, I'm Cortez, and I'm a critic. Thank you so very much for watching.